Welcome to this episode of Tech Rainmakers. Today we are in conversation with Angie Bird, who is Director of Web Technology at Like Realtors, which is one of the largest real estate companies in the US and the largest in the Mid-South. Angie is hands-on technical manager responsible for application, web, data, online and social media related services for Like group of companies. And she manages teams both in US and in India. I will now let Angie talk more about herself and introduce herself to us. Over to you, Angie.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here and have the chat with you today. Let's see. So I've actually just celebrated my 22nd anniversary with Like this year. So that's been kind of fun. I never thought I'd be somewhere for, more than 20 years. You don't really plan it that way, but here I am. And over the years, I've done so many different things that now I do manage what we do online and in data, which is a big process for a real estate company. So it's been very interesting over the years. And then personally, I'm a mom and I have a 17-year-old and an 11-year-old. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So tell us more about how your role has evolved, because you have, one of those rare profiles where you have been with the company, as you said, going on to 22 years now. But these days, people want to shift after 4, 5 years. So what made you stay and how has your profile evolved over the years?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most important things, I would say it's two parts, really. It's the ability to learn and grow and have work that's interesting to me, and also the ability to have flexibility and priority with my family. So, over the years, when I very first started in the IT department, I actually didn't know anything about technology or IT. I was just brought into the department kind of to be an assistant. And so I used to sit in the staff meetings and not really understand any of the acronyms that were being used or things that would be said. And I would write down notes about words I didn't know and I'd go Google them later. And so it's very interesting. And so I think what happened over the years is I started being curious and asking questions. Like a question would come into the IT department and I didn't know how to answer it. And I would, pass it off to somebody who did. And then later I'd go ask them, well, how did you do that? And then over the years, as I started doing that, I started learning the answers to some of those questions and being able to ask them. And then I started being interested in certain types of work. And at one point, my boss said to me, well, what of all of our projects are the most interesting to you that you want to get more involved in or learn more about? And I said, well, the web. I really think the website is very interesting. And so I started learning about how to do web development. And I started taking classes in HTML and CSS and those kinds of things. And then I started doing small projects. And over time, over the years, it's like I would be involved in some design projects or some coding or some data work and some support of the services. And so one big thing is that I think a lot of times people shift jobs because they're looking for work that challenges them, or they're looking for an opportunity to expand their career. And here I have been able to continually learn and grow my responsibilities over time. So that's happened here. And then the other one is having a culture and support of knowing that it's important to be able to balance your time with your family. So I've had young children and I've been a mom, and that's been a priority for me to, be able to go to their basketball game and that kind of thing. So it's been a mix of those two, really.
How have this particular understanding and the way you have lived your life with Like over the last 22 years changed how you approach your team members? Do you see there is a difference in how you approach your team compared to maybe others who have been shifting continuously? Is there a difference there? Maybe it's consciously being done by you. Maybe it's just that it just comes across that way because you have lived your life a certain way.
Yeah, I think I try to incorporate a few different components of that in the people that I work with and the people that I manage. And one is like one of the most, important aspects of my personal development has been people who are willing to take time and explain things or teach me things and give me the opportunity to try something. And so people who are willing to take that extra time and do that, that's so great. And so I try to, when I have somebody who's interested in being involved in a certain project or wanting to learn a certain skill, giving them that opportunity to learn and be involved in that work. Like I think, and helping guide someone through finding what those opportunities are for themselves, I think is really important. And I also think it's really important that you have it. I have this mindset. So when it comes to working with people, I have a mindset, which is approach of, I start from the place that I think that everybody's trying to do the best job that they can. Wow. Right. And so when something doesn't go exactly right, well, let's be curious about why that is and assume that the person's trying to do their best work. So you can go in and have a conversation with that person and say, hey, what happened in this situation? And you'll hear with them their perspective. And then you get a lot of insight into what support and resources they need in order to be able to do that job in the way that you were expecting or you were hoping or you were wanting them to grow into. So I think that that's very important, because when you're learning something new, you're not going to do it right the first time. There's going to be mistakes. And so I always try to make people feel comfortable. And I tell them about some of the biggest mistakes that I've made. Like one time there's a big one where I accidentally made everybody's, we have all these different websites, and I accidentally updated the code so that everybody's website was the same one website. And it was like 2,000 websites were now this one website. And it was live that way for a couple hours. And that was like one of my
Wow. Wow. So that's thanks, Angie, for being so open with us and sharing that with us. And if you're sharing that with your team, I mean, your team is very lucky to have the leader talk about their mistakes. Let me bring you back to the conversation about technology. So digital transformation is the current buzzword. Everybody is talking about it, and everybody has a different understanding of it. So how does digital transformation look like in your industry, or specifically in Cry? Like, if you can share some examples, it'll be good for us to hear.
Yeah, it's been a very big part of the real estate industry. So when I very first started working at CryLike, we actually had, so where people list their properties for sale, all the agents, we call it the MLS, the multiple listing service. And there's software where they all enter the information about the properties that they have for sale. And then everybody can go and look those, and we share data from that. And it's the core of how the industry works today. But when I very first started at CryLike, that didn't exist in a software form. So what there was a big printed book, and they called it the MLS book. And it was printed like once a month. And as an agent, you got one copy of the book, and so, and you couldn't give it to people, you couldn't give it to your clients. You had the information on what was available for sale if you were the agent. Well, what happened over time is now that's completely opposite. Every single consumer has access to multiple versions of that information on various different websites, and it's updated within, minutes of it being entered into the MLS system. And so the agent having access to the only one who knew that data has completely changed. And that's not the case anymore. So there's pretty significant changes in digital transformation, and people's comfort level. It's interesting in the industry. Every agent is their own independent business, and everybody has different styles and comfort levels of adopting technology. So you might have somebody who's still operating on their index card system, and you might have somebody who's gone completely and totally paperless, and digital. So it's been interesting supporting all of the realms of those worlds of people's interest in technology, but it's been a big shift.
Wow. Oh, that's interesting, from that book to, but if everything is online today and everybody has access to it, so doesn't the privacy and the security of data become a concern for you? So how have you how big is that issue and how have you handled it over the years as the changes have been happening?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of components to that that are very
Mm,
complicated, because a lot of the issues that are around privacy and security are kind
mm,
of the scenario where it doesn't really hurt you until it hurts you, right? And so, like, you can be going on great and thinking everything's good, but if you're not addressing some underlying issues, you're taking a lot of risk. And if the
mm.
risk never happens, oh, okay. But if the risk happens, it could be very devastating.
Yeah.
And so, from a perspective of being the person who's in the technology department, I think a lot of times people aren't aware of the risks associated with those issues. And so the
Mm,
role of technology professionals is helping to educate and explain, like, what
mm,
will happen if we have a ransomware attack, or what will happen if confidential private information of consumers gets out there and somebody takes
mm,
advantage of it and steals
mm,
their identity, or
mm,
what happens if somebody goes to a closing and the money that they have to buy their house, they wire to a fraudulent account. I mean, there's all kinds of aspects of
yeah.
that are very very difficult. And then another big one is, talking about that technology change of the
Mm,
sharing of data, from going from the book to everything being digitally shared.
mm,
There's been, in conjunction with that, a whole set of complex rules that
mm.
are all different depending on where you are in the country and what organization it's a part of. And so understanding and managing and honoring all of those rules from all of those different places has been a complex job responsibility in itself.
So would you say that your role actually has become tougher over the years? Technology is supposed to kind of simplify our lives. At the consumer end, probably it has, but at the back end, it has made life a little bit more tough for you, or
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think it's all in your mindset of how you
mm,
approach it. I mean, you could say, yeah, there's a lot of complexities and it makes my life more difficult or
mm.
challenging. Or you could look at your challenges and say it makes my day more interesting. So I think there's different ways to look at it. But recently I've started trying to remind myself and simplify myself, which is that technology should make our lives um, easier and more efficient.
Mm,
And for example, like in the case of a
mm,
real estate agent, our philosophy is not that they should be figuring out how to click the buttons and make the
mm,
software work and spending all of this time trying to understand technology and marketing. Like, that's not the
mm,
best use of their time. The best use of their time is to be connecting with people and building
mm,
relationships and working on that aspect of the business. And so the way that technology should play the role is, can the technology simplify some of the work that they do
mm,
repeatedly? Can the technology help them connect with people in better ways? And so I try to look at those types of questions when
mm,
I'm stuck in the complexity or the details of something. I try to step out of it and I'm like, is this actually making our lives easier or more
mm.
difficult? And I think it's a very simple question that it's very complicated sometimes to make something
Mm.
very simple, but I think it's the one to look at.
Wow. Wow. Awesome. So how have you, so you talked about when you started your journey, asking people about things and Googling it to up your knowledge of this sector. And then you also kind of trained and all that stuff. But as the technology has changed in the last 5, 10 years and you have been in the leadership position. So how have you kept yourself on track with everything that is happening around in the industry? So what have you
Well,
found?
it's kind of interesting. I mean, you always have things that you have to do to keep learning and reading and being curious, and you
Mm,
always are Googling the new stuff. It's like at one point there were no iPhones, right? And there were no mobile apps for iPhones, and then it gets dropped in there. And I feel like technology is always that way, where you have to be a
mm,
self-learner and you have to be motivated and interested in learning it yourself. And I think that that's one of the most important qualities of someone
mm,
who's successful in technology, is being curious and being able to learn on their own.
mm,
But it's interesting. The other part I think of it is that the field is so broad and there's
mm,
so many aspects of true expertise in different areas that it's not possible for you to become an expert in programming and data and server
mm,
maintenance and backups and infrastructure and networks and supporting people and
mm.
making artistic sites. I mean, like, all of these skills are such a broad set of skills that I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who are really good at what they do, and then be open to learning from them, no matter where you are in your career or where you are in your growth. You can always learn from people around you. It's like someone who does the data job, I wouldn't necessarily be able to do their job to the level that they do it. I rely on them to
Mm.
share with me that information as we go along. So surrounding yourself with a lot of people and being continually curious and learning, for sure.
Wow. Wow, that's really interesting insight and takeaway for any young leader who is starting on this journey. So let's talk about the last 2-3 years, which have been weird and strange in their own way. And your industry was one of the industries that was probably the worst hit, besides media and yes, hospitality. So now that things are coming back to this new normal, how have the times changed from the technology perspective, from pre-COVID to how things are today? Do you see a big change, or do you feel that it's just, the whatever wherever we were before COVID, we are back there?
No, no, very different. I feel like it's a new world that we won't go back to the way that it was.
Mm,
It's just people's mindsets have shifted in so many ways. So it's
mm,
kind of interesting. When COVID first started happening, no one was going out to see properties,
yeah,
right? And so there was a really big concern in the real estate industry about how this is going to affect
yeah.
like home sales,
Mm,
and it was very alarming at first. I mean, it was kind of like this thought process of, wow, I mean, if no one's going to be going out and all of this kind of thing. And there was not a lot of structure or mindset around
mm,
remote access to things. I mean, there are a lot of jobs that were remote, or
mm,
people are used to working far away. It's like me working with the group in India.
yeah,
I'm used to
yeah.
working in a remote form there, but in a lot of places, that's not a comfort level. So it's interesting. As that first happened, I think real estate agents are very adaptable
Mhm.
and through different
Wow.
types of circumstances. And they started being creative and like, okay, well, I have a house for sale and somebody's interested in seeing it, and they're not comfortable going in person with other people being there, so I'm
Mm,
going to go walk through on a video tour with them.
wow.
I mean, or being lots of being creative. And so it's kind of interesting because we shifted into this market that's
Mm,
truly a multiple offer seller
mm,
market, where a house can be listed and the exact same day get many, many offers to purchase it. And so that was a very unexpected development from
mm.
COVID, that change in the real estate industry. And so Crylikes had some of their best years since COVID, as
Wow.
far as those numbers go.
Mm,
And the other thing is about remote work. Now that
mm,
people are comfortable and they see how remote work is possible, and all of that, I think that people won't shift back to necessarily having to go to a particular
yeah.
location. And it opens up your mindset, like, well, if I could work with somebody on the computer, like, it really
Mm.
doesn't matter if they're in my city or they're in another city. So I think that that's a big mindset that's just starting to open, right? That'll open a lot of possibilities, especially internationally.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. So, would you say that the transformation in your industry has kind of it has been amped up by COVID, the digital transformation or the technological evolution has kind of been amped up because of COVID.
Yeah, I think it forced a lot of changes to happen really
Uh,
fast because people had
uh,
to be creative and just figure out ways to do it and shift their
uh,
mindset. So it kind of forced a big jump up, I think.
Wow, awesome. So let's talk about you personally a little bit more, because I was really impressed by the volunteering work that you have been doing over the years. So tell us more about it. Like, how did you get started into it, and why is it important to you?
20 years ago now,
Hmm.
I saw an advertisement for an organization in my town that tutors adults, helps them learn how to read, helps them learn English as a second language, helps them take a test to get their high school
Hmm.
equivalency. And it was only for adults, and it was done on a volunteer basis. And you could go through training to learn how to become a tutor and help support. And I thought, and your commitment was to meet with a student once a week and help them through their program. And
Hmm.
so I thought, well, that was interesting. I'd like to do that. And so I started doing that. And I tutored a guy who was originally from Ethiopia. I tutored another woman who was from Ghana. I just had a lot of interesting
Hmm.
experiences. And actually, I'm still in touch with that woman today, and she lives in
Wow.
the Netherlands, and it's
Wow.
kind of fun. And so, and then as I was a tutor, the people who worked in the office heard that I knew some stuff about websites or data. And so they asked if I might help in the office a little bit. And so then I started doing some web and data work in the office. And then that evolved over in time into me being a part of the board and, working in that way with the organization. So I volunteered with them probably for 20 years. And then a couple of years ago, I decided I was ready for something different.
Hmm.
And I had a friend who volunteers. There's a crisis text hotline where for people who are feeling suicidal or they're having a really difficult time in their life, they can
Hmm.
anonymously text in to a number and have
Hmm.
a text conversation to get support. And I have a friend who's in the UK who is doing the UK version of that. And she was talking to me about her experience. And I just thought that was very interesting and something that I could do and I would enjoy. And so I went through training to become a volunteer for the crisis text line. And that has been very eye-opening to me
Hmm.
about what people really experience that they don't talk about,
Hmm.
because of, all kinds of difficult feelings associated with difficult circumstances. And so I think people go through really difficult things where they really need somebody to help them in those moments. And so, yeah, that's been a lot of my time involved in that.
Wow. And you also have been doing public speaking for last 20 years. So how do you manage all this, Angie? Because that's a lot. And the current voluntary work that you are doing, I mean, it's also emotionally draining at times. So how do you manage everything? Usually people are just done, and after a day's work they're done. There's not much space left for anything else. So how have you been managing everything, being a mother and being a volunteer and being a director of IT services and your public speaking? How do you manage all that?
Well, I think one thing is that when I think about my life, I don't want to wake up, go to work, come home, fix dinner, watch TV, go to sleep, repeat it day after day after day after day after day. Like that to me, I mean, there's a certain level of routine that is good,
Mm,
but I need something mixed in there. And
mm,
so I think it's like you have to find those boundaries of what you can
mm,
do. For example, so when I first started tutoring, it was meeting with someone once a week. It wasn't a
mm,
daily thing. It wasn't, and so I said, well, can I meet with someone once a week, one night
mm,
after work or one Saturday or something like that? And so I think
mm.
it's very important to find that balance, but I'm going to share with you one of my favorite things to say about my life, which is I will never look back on my life and wish that I watched more TV. And so it's like very true. It's really funny. I mean, I my TV time has just gotten less and less and less during the years, and I do other things during that time,
Mm,
whether it be going outside or drawing or writing or volunteering or doing something with my kids or spending
mm,
time with friends, whatever that is. But that for me, it's a real honest look at where are you really spending your time. And I
mm.
think a lot of us have a lot of time that we spend on social media or TV. And, I mean, where you choose how you prioritize your time.
So over the years, you have mentored a lot of young minds, professionally as well as personally. So what is something that you would like to say to somebody who is, and now I'm bringing back to your professional sphere, that somebody who is entering the IT space or is a young leader in that space, what would you say to them at this time in their lives?
Well, I think that technology is a really great place for this to happen. But my number one piece of advice for somebody is that, when it comes to gaining experience in an
Mm,
area, you can do so much through volunteering and being eager and being
mm,
curious to build
mm,
up experience. So let's say you don't have a lot of job experience in a particular area. Well,
mm,
figure out how you can volunteer, how you can do that in your free
mm,
time and start building up those skills in a resume. Because for me, I mean, some of the best people that we've had working in technology didn't
mm,
necessarily have a technology degree or
mm,
didn't have starting experience in the area that they ended up working in. They were
mm,
very curious and they were very motivated. One of my favorite stories was a guy who was one of our best people in web support
uh,
and helping people with their websites, who was actually a music minister before he got into it. But what happened is that in his free time, he was kind of the person that helped people with their websites, his
mm,
friends. And so he
mm,
developed this resume and this list of all these projects that he had worked on. And I think
mm,
at any point in your career that you can go do that, and you can go to say to somebody, hey, I'd love to learn about this, and I'd be happy to help you with that project.
mm,
And or friends who are interested, and build up those
mm.
skills and demonstrate that you've learned that knowledge, and you'll get opportunities to work in those areas.
Wow. I remember from one of our earlier conversations, you mentioning this, that was one way you learned, that you just went and volunteered when you found something like really interesting, that, okay, let me help you there. So Angie, now my, last and very, it's close to my heart question, that what would you say to an Angie, a younger Angie, if you met her today?
I would say one of the most important questions is to ask yourself what you want in your life, and to not be so worried about expectation or obligation of other people. Other people have ideas about how life should be, or society or culture. And what you need to do is get quiet and listen to your heart into what's a good fit for you, because you don't want your life to be doing things that other people think you should do. You
Hmm.
want to really look at like, what will make me enjoy my days and enjoy the process of all of this. And so really think about what you want, and let go of what other people think you should be doing, and think about what you really want to do.
Wow. Wow, that's a great insight. And because most of our audience is these technical guys, so I will end with a more technical question, which is that what is that one big thing you feel in the technical domain uh, that is to watch out for, maybe in your industry, maybe in some other industry, but something that's just there, and that's going to be the next big thing in technology space.
Put me on a spot for a question. I'm not sure how to answer, actually.
Or
I
maybe
think
something,
I honestly, my actual feeling there is that it's been such this surprise. I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, it could be anything. Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of, expert opinions on what's immediate in the next few years, that kind of thing. It's like Facebook working on their meta and their different types of interacting online and all of that. But I think it's going to be something, and it's going to be something you don't expect, and it's going to be continual, and you just have to be ready and open for surprises.
Yes, definitely. That I think all of us have learned that over the last 2 years, that you just have to be ready for the surprises. So thank you. We'll end this on that note of being ready for surprises. Thank you so much for your time, Angie. It was amazing talking to you. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions for Angie, you can leave them in the comments, and we will take them to Angie and have the answers back to you. And you can also share with us what more do you want us to cover in our talks. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your time, Angie.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.